December 8th, 2005 is a day of utmost importance. This was the day the Yakuza franchise saw the release of its first installment. A do or die in many ways, a game that wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the complete and unshakable dedication of every single member of Sega's CS R&D Department 1, now known as Ajiji Studio. It was an entry upon whose success Nagoshi Toshihiro staked his future at Sega, and for the company itself, it was a financial risk only comparable to the likes of Shenmue before it. This PS2 game represents infinitely more than any YouTube soliloquy could really communicate, so rather than doing a retrospective for the occasion, we'll go about this anniversary in a different way. The following will be a brief interpretation of Yakuza's substance, its currently building legacy, and impact, in the context of both the first game and the franchise at large. In other words, here's a longtime fan of the series just yapping about a variety of relevant topics, so I hope you're prepared for what's to follow. Without further ado, let's begin. If there is one thing that could solidify the magnitude of Yakuza 1, even by today's standards, it's the fact that the essence of this experience is still felt in every action entry that followed it. The first game was a blend of many influences and genre philosophies, with the end product veering closest to being an action RPG with beat-em-up combat. It's not as fast and replayable as a standard beat-em-up would be, but it's also not as stat-reliant as a standard RPG. If you were attentive enough, you could beat the campaign with no upgrades, after all, which I always appreciated. It's why the process of unlocking more moves or maxing out your stats didn't feel like a chore, because no semblance of a grind was genuinely forced on you. And plus, combat alone wasn't the only activity in the game to reward you with solid amounts of XP. You had a relatively small city to traverse, where it felt like every few steps gave you a different activity to lose yourself in. From minigames to collectibles to sub-stories that had significantly more weight to them than I'd first imagined due to their missable nature. It made you think carefully about stepping into the next story chapter on a regular basis, and it hammered home the notion that this world wouldn't wait for you, which made the experience all the more memorable. You had freedom within reason. You could defend yourself, but not senselessly attack anyone. You could indulge in every side activity, but full completion was to be earned and meticulously planned towards. Every element of this game was rough around the edges in some way. And maybe that's the biggest reason why it resonated with so many people, because it had heart. The combat lacked the polish of what would follow and had a messy lock-on, but it also carried this feeling of impact with every punch, every hit action, and every collision, weapon-wise or otherwise. The story had a pacing that stopped and went as it pleased, but this ultimately allowed the world you inhabited to breathe and present itself to you in an organic manner, serving as the cornerstone for every future arc or character development we'd experience in the series. Even the initially despised English dub, an absolute product of its time, wound up becoming the subject of ironic praise, snowballing into legitimate enjoyment due to how internet humor has changed over time. Having grown up in the PlayStation 2 era, everything that made up the first Yakuza game felt like a dream come true for both the younger version of myself and the person I grew into through the series, hence why I'd always return to this game, even though the best playing version of it lacked a proper localization. Now, it's a given that no franchise would be what it is without its first entry, either because said game would become a strong blueprint for future titles, or alternatively, due to it teaching the devs what to avoid or refine moving forward. However, for any fault I may find in the first Yakuza game, when comparing it to some later peaks of the series, I'd always recommend every Yakuza fan to experience it. It's not a mere case of historical value. The game is simply a tightly knit experience that instills this signature type of fulfillment that only a Yakuza game can offer. It even gave way to a nigh-perfect sequel that focused more on refinement than experimentation for the hell of it, further confirming how many things Ajiji got right from the get-go with the first Yakuza. That's why it's strange how the only way to play it these days includes 3 console ports, only one of which is in English. But we're not here to bang on that drum again today. The point is that as long as Ajiji kept releasing games that expanded on what came before, they'd inevitably reach widespread acclaim, which is precisely what happened. Here's a question. How do you expand on what you've done in the past without veering too far? Well, you change things gradually, giving people time to adjust. One should never abandon the core blueprints of what made people fall for your artistic venture, but that doesn't mean you can't experiment with elements beyond the core to keep your works evolving. No matter the console generation, the structure of a Yakuza game, at least on a fundamental level, has largely remained the same. The world and characters inhabiting it are contributing to a blend of sincere character drama and absurdism. Design mainstays like sub-stories, addictive minigames, maps that have the contents of an open world without the bloat of one, all of these would be accounted for no matter the console release observed. By comparison though, there was still a multitude of design choices that will be slowly taken out of the franchise, even though their implementation in the past may have served a ludonarrative purpose. The amount of missable content would gradually decrease as the series progressed. You would be allowed to save your game anywhere, rather than just at strategically placed payphones. You could fast travel from a variety of locations, rather than just the taxi spots at the corners of the map, and some games even let you revisit boss fights without replaying the entire game every time. These are examples of decisions that make the games more approachable, while resulting in very little criticism from an average player. But other creative choices would prove to be more divisive in their execution. Changing the percentage of serious versus lighthearted content in the critical path is an example of that, as if you compare the earliest stories of the series to the latest ones, you can notice a shift in which form of tone would take precedence in a campaign on the surface. Having said that, the shift in percentages would be closer to a 60-40 split most of the time, rather than the series just being silly with no stakes, as it is sometimes believed. And when the newer stories would go dark, they do it with no reservations to balance the scales, in a sense. Having this transpire on a title-by-title basis, rather than RGG just flipping a proverbial switch, is why Yakuza titles with a zombie focus, power of friendship themes, or ones with pirate escapades could exist alongside entries focusing on themes of tragic upbringings, the weight of a legacy and expectations, or underworld wars scaling all of Japan. The fact that one of the oldest former members of RGG, Daisuke Sato, described the series as a place where you do stupid things seriously feels like a cementing of how Yakuza was always more than a by-the-book crime series. Sincerity is what defines the games, so if you commit to your themes wholeheartedly, you'll find them resonating with a large portion of your audience as strongly as the older games. It sounds strange, but that's likely why the turn-based entries were so quickly accepted by much of the fanbase once they released in the West. They still have this recognizable Yakuza flair to them, with the story of 7 in many ways mirroring that of the first game, or looking at how so many JRPG mainstays feel right at home with design choices from Yakuza 1. Sub-stories act as your standard RPG quests, elaborate essence skills feel like heat actions, but you use SB instead of heat. Even the idea of an extensive grind in 7 is lessened by the fact that you can beat the game dozens of levels behind the recommendations if you understand the mechanics well enough. The games are still a blend of various genre philosophies, it's just that the percentage of the influences shifted with time. And yet, the beat-em-up influence still creeps its way back in here, either through the input-heavy classes like Freelancer, Perfect Guards, or the variety of combat improvements from Infinite Wealth, putting it at a perfect 50-50 split between turn-based and beat-em-up approaches. These days, there is a notion that true Yakuza ended after the exodus of Nagoshi and other RGG Studio alumni. And while that may have been the point where the series finally stepped out of a given player's comfort zone from a particular design category, the series has steadily moved into different directions with every game they released, to where the cutoff point for quote-unquote classic Yakuza could be different from one fan to the next. Yakuza 1 and 2 shared so many design and structure similarities with one another that they might as well be seen as their own self-contained era. Kenzan and Yakuza 3, in a comparable vein, through their evolution in narrative structuring with in medias res openings, more elaborate schemes behind the scenes, and a stronger focus on political drama, had their own identity standing out from many other Yakuza games, though still sharing the franchise blueprint. The multi-protag experiences of Yakuza 4, Dead Souls, and 5 pushed the team's ambition even further than what came before, with its gameplay and narrative experimentation reaching ever so closely to a variety of breaking points through their development, but the risks taken have perhaps resulted in some of the strongest support from the parts of the community that actually clicked with these, at times divisive entries. It feels like any groupation you look at expands on the core of a Yakuza experience with its own what-if stipulations. Whether we're addressing the early Dragon Engine era mechanically speaking, the turn-based entries in almost every regard, Kurohyo with its Colosseum emphasis and splendor of youth, Judgment with its perspective on justice and reinventing the wheel, Guidance, less is more philosophy with untouchable resolutions, and so on. To say that the series is separated in such a binary way as old versus new would in many ways undermine the growth the franchise underwent year by year. And while such vocabulary will still be the go-to segmentation of the franchise in popular discourse, it's clear that there is more to the often theorized soul of Yakuza than is being let on. The weight of a franchise's legacy is shown by more than just the games tied to it. If you make something compelling enough, you can grant your work an immaterial legacy alongside a material one. I believe that the community around these games was a crucial part of the franchise's growth in more ways than just financially supporting the games that released. Remember how Yakuza 5 and Yakuza 0 would not have gotten an English localization if not for the community speaking up about the franchise's importance to them. Between that and sharing copious amounts of memes, this dominoed Yakuza into widespread acclaim, likely granting the team more resources for even more expansive games down the line. Even more evidently than there, popularity polls and general community support towards certain characters would result in said characters being given their own substantial campaigns, with Majima becoming a Doutragonist in Zero and getting his own Gaiden game, or in how Mine will end up leading Dark Ties in a few months' time. Communication between fans and devs alike is important, and if you manage to have your franchise's messages manifest themselves in a community that holds you to your own standards, it means you'll always have someone who'll help you stay genuine. Even now, as we're seeing some less than savory decisions affect the series, the community's response to it all leaves me feeling hopeful, cause the vast majority of people here has the franchise's best interests in mind, and is letting their actions show that, as they have in the past. It's why I think that what we're going through at present time will become just another example of the franchise's resilience by the time the 30th anniversary comes about. Yakuza and the people inspired by it always bounce back, and this time should be no different, thanks to everything we've gone through and learned thus far. Legacies are complicated. The people involved on all sides create this perpetual back and forth building off one another and creating something that's more than the sum of its parts. In the case of Yakuza specifically, it evolved a 20-year-old game its creators believed in into a phenomenon with global appeal that changed the lives of many. We have a collection of games here that is simultaneously a lesson in what it means to live and to express care for those around you, a hub for virtual tourism, and a place where any ardent fan could feel at home, with everything in between somehow being accounted for. There's a lot of things for which you can remember Yakuza, only few of which were directly mentioned here to prevent the video from dominoing into 60-minute territory. But whatever message you take from its 20-year legacy and 20-plus games, I think we're all better off for having experienced this franchise and grown alongside it. So happy birthday, Ryuga Gotoku. May your greatest accomplishments still be ahead of you. This point marks the end of the purely Yakuza-oriented side of the video, so if you're not interested in matters related to this channel specifically, thank you for watching and see you later. If you stayed here and are curious over what else would be covered in this video, well, it's another celebration. With December 8th being the 20th anniversary of the series, I obviously wanted to discuss the state of the franchise today, but December 6th of this year wound up being the 5-year anniversary of this channel's creation alongside it. It's something I hadn't thought about too much back when I made it. I just wanted to create a hub where I could save my more involved video edits, and while they may be slightly dissonant to my coverage these days, they were some of my first personal contributions to the online community, and what would teach me the skills to create proper video essays later on. Fast forward to now, and I'm still struggling to wrap my head around everything that this channel and the community around it would allow me. I got to meet individuals whose content I enjoyed for years, speak to them on a personal level, and appreciate their continuous efforts even more through these conversations. I got to speak to people from Sega who are not only aware of the content, but were really positive towards it as well, to the point where I even got to cover some of these games in a more professional manner. I was given a voice in a community whose ambition and talent still fascinates me and pushes me to tackle more ambitious projects, even when my work life makes it harder to do so. I may not do this for a living, but the position I've found myself in thanks to this series is one that makes me want to keep doing this until I'm in my 60s. I realize a lot of this sounds like a farewell, but that couldn't be further from the truth. This just wound up being my 100th video on the channel, and it's overlapped with 2 highly important anniversaries to me, so it felt like the right time to speak on these subjects so sincerely. Yakuza is a series without which I wouldn't be here, and I'm not talking about content creation. The stories it told helped me escape my self-destructive tendencies and find peace through these games and the community around them. Certain parts of the series may look rough right now, but I genuinely believe that things will get better, and as long as there are people who genuinely care about Yakuza, we'll be okay. I want to thank you for your time today, for all your contributions to this channel and the Yakuza community at large. It doesn't matter if it was just a quick meme you shared, a nice comment directed at the games, or a grandiose project that engaged hundreds of people. All of these actions made this fanbase and franchise unforgettable to me, and likely tons of other people as well. You're all part of something that will never be erased, and I hope you get to enjoy this franchise's anniversary to the fullest because of that. So, until next time, take care of yourselves and have a great day. Cheers!